Hello, Mike from Canavan Wealth. Welcome back. I am doing kind of the next video in my series on teaching financial responsibility, and I have a good friend, a mentor, all sorts of titles for Drew here, who I have known for a number of years, and I think is very similar to me in the way that he kind of goes through the world financially. And we've had a lot of conversations about, financial responsibility, financial security, and all those things. And as I've been doing this series, I've realized trying to give advice, just very specific advice to families about how to teach financial responsibility is incredibly difficult because it's so family specific and everyone's situation is so different that I thought it was better to just really do it as interviews of people and in terms of what they have learned throughout their life. So, welcome, Drew. I'll let you kind of introduce yourself however you feel is appropriate, and then we'll jump into it.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. It's great to join you. My name's Drew Thomas. I have, I'm in my mid 30s now. Have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, and have worked here for a large company for the past 15 years or so. So I qualify myself as like an actual adult at this point in time. The to introduce myself and my family a little bit, I come from a family with three other siblings, a family of six, including my mom and dad. I have three sisters, one older and two younger, and so from that standpoint, relatively large family. Maybe not by by modern standards, feel like it's a pretty large family from that standpoint. So that's a quick intro on me, Mike. Do you want me to take it away with kind of introducing how finances were handled in my house and those types of things as a kid?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just jump into it. If you got something on your mind, let's talk.
Okay, yeah. So as I think about financial responsibility and how how my home life was and how I was taught as a kid. I came from a solidly middle class family, and my dad and mom are both well educated. My mom is a speech language pathologist and working in the school system. My dad has a PhD and has worked kind of an office job his entire career. So just a very normal kind of middle class type upbringing. But my parents weren't necessarily aligned when it came to financial priorities. So, my dad came from a very financially conservative background, and was really big on trying to teach financial lessons through some type of hardship, right? Like you need to go figure out how to make money, go mow the lawn, and then you'll get your Nintendo or whatever else. It was very much maybe manufactured hardship, maybe a good way to put it. I don't know exactly how to put that, but that was how he was raised, and that's how he really conveyed to me. I'm the only his only son as well, and I think he felt like there was an additional responsibility there, right, to teach me hard work, to teach me the hard knocks in some ways. Um,
So, Drew, let me jump in there because I'm a similar background to New York State teachers. They were savers. They did not avoid spending money, but they always spent it on what was important. And I always, it was the same thing. If I wanted something, I worked for it. I never had an allowance or anything to that end. I'd get Christmas money, birthday money from relatives and whatnot. But I guess my question is those, I consider that they could have bought us whatever it was, the toy we wanted, but often didn't. However, did that translate to later in life when it came to kind of big financial hardship, right? Because there's a big difference between having to buy your own Lego set, having to
mhm.
pay for your own college, car insurance, things like that. Did that translate similarly on?
Yeah, and my dad had kind of a hybrid philosophy in that space, right? It wasn't. It was more, I would say, more of a partnership as we grew older, where when it came to a car, like I bought my own car, for example, but my dad would cover insurance and gas for me. In college, he made it a priority and made a lot of sacrifices to make sure that college tuition was paid for me after scholarships and all that other kind of stuff. But I was expected to pay for my housing, for example. So it was always kind of this partnership style arrangement. Is he was willing to make those sacrifices and commit, but you also had to bring skin to the game. You also had to bring some
Right.
of your own resources or your own commitment to whatever specific goal you had. And he had expectations, right, about what those goals would be. College was one of those. It was like, you are going to go to college, and I will pay tuition, and this is the arrangement we're going to make type environment.
That was our generation, right? We'll go to college for
That's
better
right.
or worse, no matter what. For us, I think it worked out very well.
Absolutely.
There are lots of unfortunate stories out there that may not have been the sense. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this exact situation right now. I've raised my kids largely from the playbooks that I got, which was my two parents. Of we, you get a present on your birthday and you get a present on Christmas, and if you want something else, you generally, you go mow lawns or babysit or whatever it is.
Mhm.
My son's ref since he was 12. My daughter has babysit for a while and started working at a kennel. They both have jobs now, um, in that, and yet we just do not feel like I paid for my own college, kind of through a ROTC scholarship, but my parents paid for my sister's, and they were prepared to pay for mine, and that was their plan. But that is a massive financial burden, right? So I see it as a difference between, forced hardship, in terms of, like, you don't get everything you want. I don't think anyone thinks that's the appropriate way of parenting. It doesn't mean they
Right.
don't practice it, but in terms of the plan, I don't think. However, when it comes to college, I think there's a difference between, I have to pay for my own college because it's just not in the cards for my family, and I have to pay out for my own college because my parents are trying to teach me something about financial security and responsibility by, forcing me to go into, let's say, even reasonably $80,000 in debt in order to get a bachelor's degree or something, let alone, a master's degree. I think there's a difference there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this partnership thing that I was talking about with my dad, it ended when when I got married, and so that was an interesting thing because I got married relatively young, but it was a moment of, hey, we have a partnership here, and I'm going to help you with college, and we're going to get through this. And in the middle of college is when I decided to get married. And and the moment that I got married, I got, it was, for lack of a better word, just cut off. It's like, you are now a true adult,
Sure.
and figure it out,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
so I had gone, in that partnership, I had gone debt free in college for 3 years, and then bringing this new relationship and marriage and all of that along. Ended up having to take on debt, even though I was, scholarshiped by that point for tuition and other things like that. It was just the
Right.
reality of the situation, and that, um, I understand why my dad did it. I understand, it's like, hey, you got to stand on your own 2 feet. But there were
Of course.
some things that were probably harder than they needed to be, and still are harder than they need to be because of that environment, right? I look back now, that was 15 years ago now, that all of that kind of happened,
Right.
and I knew it was going to happen, right? I knew that was the decision that I was making. Um, but my dad's retiring this year, and he has his retirement portfolio, and he has all the resources he needs to have an enjoyable retirement, and more, and part of that
Right.
conversation has kind of resurfaced about, you know well, my wife Brittany and I are still holding student loan debt, for example, and other things like that, and it makes me wonder, we could have used that money at that point in time rather than using it someday when he does pass, and we process through his estate and all of those other types of issues. And so it's kind of brought a lot of conversation recently around his retirement about, you know, yeah, I don't want an inheritance. I want to be able to, I want to be able to go on vacation or utilize those resources in some way that will impact me or his grandchildren or others. Right. So
Sure.
the philosophy has kind of changed, um, in some ways. So I, I will say that part of that taught me financial and fiscal responsibility because I was pressed to do so, and part of it
Right.
was a lesson learned, but part of it was probably unnecessary as well. Right, it put an unnecessary financial burden in those spaces. That's a really hard space to kind of decide or figure out where that right point is. Right, where you're teaching a good lesson, but you don't push it so far that you're actually putting putting your kids at risk of making poor financial decisions because of the because of
Right. And
the
no
restrictions
one's
that they
gonna
have.
no
Does
one's
that make
gonna hit
sense?
that, right on the head in terms of um, optimizing how do we teach the lesson, and then at the same time how do we, for the lack of a better word, maximize family wealth to do the most good for the most number of people in the way that the people that control it want it to happen. Right. It's like my big master vision of talking about
Right.
family wealth. And those lessons are super important. I went through the hard times, in lots of financial ways, and learned the hard way about what you should and should not buy for homes, and things along those lines, and vehicles. Um, and now, I'm in a very unique situation because I manage virtually my entire family's, money. So I see it all. And it's actually what
Hmm.
got me into, working on family wealth, is being able to, when you're able to look at it cross generation and across multiple families, even, because my in-laws are a wonderful part of kind of our entire economic picture. I realized, wow, there's so much that we could optimize here. And my family is very open about finances and things, which not every family is. That
No.
I realized the reason I don't do this with my clients is because I don't have this, kind of broad look at their entire household. But I probably could for some clients that it was, wanted to, that thought that was appropriate. But just kind of jumping back to, I'm now, Drew and I are, although we're similar age, a little bit younger than me. My kids are substantially older than his. Mine are headed off to college, and I've been faced with, the task of what is the plan for college now. Both have gotten, fairly substantial scholarships through either state programs or whatnot. We looked at some really expensive private schools, but my kids, they figured it out themselves that it was not the right choice. Even though, it's not that we necessarily couldn't have afforded it, it's just, kind of a value prospect. And both my kids have made very smart financial decisions when it comes to their undergraduate degree, knowing the whole time that, we were going to pay for them. For a long while, we told them that, and I think this is a good option if your kids are possibly facing a choice, possibly making a choice that, is not only in your best financial interest, but in their best financial interest. Like, as we had said, you are going to get a student loan for 10% of whatever your education costs you. And when you finish it, or finish it, finish something else, or, finish a degree or something, then we will pay off that loan. But if we don't finish, we're not going to take all of this expense onto us, because I'm not sure, to an 18-year-old, the difference between a $3,000 loan and a $30,000 loan is all that different, right? When they
Hmm.
look at it, they still look at their paycheck and see $250.
Yeah.
Putting a 30,000, if they do it for 2 years or something at the wrong school, and they're a $60,000 bill on a kid who now does not have a 4-year degree. I think some of the responsibility there has to fall back on the parent in terms of, like, you allowed them to put themselves in that situation, right? So like, now changing the conversation to you, Drew, as the parent, and you're looking at the kids. What are some of the things you've been trying to do in terms of teaching financial responsibility to your kid, your kids?
Yeah, and I have a soon to be 9 year old and a 5 year old, right? So you and I are in very different places in that journey, right? About where that is. I've noticed that a lot of that financial responsibility is just literacy, right? One thing um, that I think was a missed opportunity for my parents. Now, I opened here saying that my parents were not on the same page about finances, and maybe I should explain that a little bit. My dad was this kind of ultra conservative, very partnership, hard knock oriented type person, and my mom was much more kind of, for lack of a better word, I guess, extravagant in her finances. Just wanted to make sure that the kids had nice clothes and had shoes and had new boots every year. It was something that she didn't have as a kid that she really really wanted to provide for her own kids. And so she had a lot different financial goals than my dad did when we were young. And so from that standpoint, there was always that tension in my growing up of two different philosophies, and that meant that money wasn't really talked about openly um,
Hmm.
in my house when I was growing up. And so a lot of the lessons that I learned happened later as a teenager, and mostly happened from my dad, who really forced it upon me in a way that I don't think any teenager is going to like anything their parent says to them, but in kind of an aggressive way, I guess you could say, of like, this is the way it's going to be. And if you want a car, or if you want car insurance, these are the conditions. It was heavy handed, but uh, you know a little bit heavier handed than I think if I had a little bit more literacy and would have been able to help make those decisions, right? And so as I look at my 8 year old and my 5 year old, it's all about understanding what money is, understanding the cost of what things are. And so that's often, in a very simplistic way, for a 5 year old is taking a look and making comparisons between different things so they can understand, hey, if we go out to eat, we went out to eat to Red Robin yesterday, and we talked about how much the meals cost, right? So we talked about how much that
Yeah.
hamburger cost, and how much the corn dogs cost, and made some comparisons about what a Lego set costs, for example, right? So that they can kind of get an idea of, you know, kind of maybe how expensive things are, or where you decide to put your money in certain ways. And so we try to have those really small conversations now. And what I'm hoping in the future, as they become teenagers and young adults, is to really have continually open conversations about banking and investing, and creating that literacy for them so they can make their own decisions. They may be different than my decisions, right? But I hope that I can provide them with enough literacy that they'll be able to make those decisions. It sounds like, Mike, for your kids, it sounds like they have that literacy, right? Because they're kind of thinking through those things and maybe making some of those decisions that you'd hope that they would make based on your own experience. So
Yeah, I'd feel like a real failure as both a businessman and a dad if my own children were not financially savvy. As you probably know, who's a friend of mine who I talk with a lot. I have like a probably because of my business, I have a very abnormal comfort level about talking about money. Not only are many of my friends clients, but I spend my entire life talking about money. So I am, the first person to jump to financial things. And some people, I know that probably puts some people off in a social standpoint of like, Canavan is always talking about money. But for me, it's kind of work. I'm when we famously talked about interest rates a lot, and uh, it was just you know, normal topic for me to ask people in a party, what they were doing with their mortgage or whatnot at that time, because record low interest rates and thing. And it's similarly with you. So yeah, my kids, I
Yeah.
think they got it. They're different. They're very different. My two, I have twins, by the way. They're very very different in terms of many different things, and they have different financial lives as well. My son is as tight as the rest of the Canavans. My daughter is not as tight, but she is financially responsible. It doesn't concern me that she's going to make poor decisions, kind of in the rest of life. So yeah, I'm happy with their own. I had absolutely fantastic mentors. Just kind of circling back to what you're saying, I think the more you can talk with kids about money and have involve them, maybe not in a decision making role, um, the better. Assuming that you're doing it the right way, which I know you are, and so yeah, I mean that was my first video. Is kind of the kitchen table is the number one tool that you can teach financial
Yeah.
responsibility, in that just exposing them, like you said, to comparative things and to what things actually cost, right? That first time they get a paycheck and it's like they made $100 and they just seem like whole, like I am rich. And then you point out that we go out once a week or something to eat, and the whole meal is more than that. Think
Yeah.
about what that is. Think about comparison to how much it costs just to pay for the home or whatnot. It costs 20 times that for the mortgage. um,
Yeah.
I think it starts helping them put it in perspective. And then circling back to kind of forced hardship, you know, the simple truth is if we live in a rural area, if my kids wanted to work, they would not be able to afford a car, especially in the post-COVID used cars, plus insurance and gas. It was a choice of, do we allow them to work and learn all of those valuable life lessons about working, or do we force them to buy their own vehicle? Now, for some people, there's not going to be an option there, right? It's not in the cards that
Mhm.
they're going to be able to buy their kids a vehicle. But we chose to get used, very inexpensive vehicles. We cover their insurance, we cover their gas. They will cover their own gas once they go off to college. You'll get them to and from college, and the meal plan, and the
Yeah.
room and board and everything, and books and everything. But everything past that will be when they work in the summer. So, and in terms of, hopefully they don't watch this, we will, I'm sure, help them with down payments on homes. Not all of it, but just as much in the way my folks did.
Yeah.
And
And
go ahead.
I was going to say, as I project into that space, my dad did a lot of things right, and both my parents did a lot of things right in those spaces. And so I made the comment about, where that right point is, right, where you teach the lesson, but maybe don't create undue hardship. And that's really what I'm trying to navigate as I project forward is, how do we, I'm hoping with higher financial literacy that we're going to be in a space where they maybe understand that environment a little bit better and have the ability to negotiate those things, right? So as you think about, the student loan thing that you were just talking about, or some other type of arrangement, it's each family based on the resources and the number of kids and all of those other things that each family has. It's really, I feel like it's really creating an environment where you got to understand that you've got to work for the money that you get, and that money has value, because it allows you to do things right. And so those two lessons, if those two lessons can be taught, however they're taught, whether that's that kid is buying their own vehicle, they're going out and working a consistent job or something else. um, that's as I kind of project into the future, that's what I'm thinking of, is trying to teach those two lessons and
I think
structure those
yeah.
challenges around those lessons, right?
And I think there's a big difference between where your family is in the timeline of building family wealth. The first generation, which is for many of us, is our parents, which is our baby boomer parents,
Mhm.
who probably inherited a little bit, but their parents probably had pensions. and did not have, 401ks that ultimately they could not spend to zero, because that's just not how retirement works anymore. You can't die broke. Um,
Mhm.
and so we're really the first generation that I feel like grew up with financial security in the and really felt the impact, and were able to see the difference between, like, often us and kind of the other kids in school that are still, middle class, but did not have that financial security that we possibly did. And the way I see money, especially inheritances and things like that, is like the security that brings is so important. And I understood how it impacted my life. And I want to make sure that every generation after me understands that important lesson, that the security money brings is more valuable than what it can buy. And often why I think you see such generational differences, specifically in our two generations, in you know teaching that to the next generation, that third generation. It's going to be well, it'll be interesting to see, whether my kids did have it a little too easy, right, in
Yeah.
terms of that. And but no one's going to hit it right on the head. Any closing
Yeah.
thoughts, Drew?
You know, as you're talking about that, and I'm thinking, like I said, my dad's hitting retirement this year, so this has actually been a conversation between he and I that has happened. We've talked quite extensively about some of this types of some of these topics just recently, and maybe a parting thought is, and I think the parting thought that I have is that wealth does bring stability. It brings stability long term, but it's also a question, as I think about it, as somebody who's generating my own wealth and is going to pass that on to my own kids. Um, at what point is that wealth going to be most impactful in their lives? And I'm recognizing, from in the conversations I'm having with my dad, um, that wealth probably could have had a higher impact earlier in my life than what it will when uh, you know when he's all finished out, and he passes on and leaves us this great legacy, right? This great inheritance that he's built his entire life to put together. He's very proud of it. He should be very proud of it. He's worked really hard to be where he's at, and it just I reflect on that, and I'm like, there's certain points in time where that could have had an impact for me or my siblings. Um, and that creates a little bit different environment as I look forward to myself of like, when do I help my own kids out? When do I help them with student loan debt? When do I help them with a down payment for a house? Those are things that I've dealt with individually with zero help from my parents. And those are when I look at, what am I going to change? What's going to be different? I look to, hey, when am I going to engage that wealth and that stability to benefit my kids at those critical points in time, those critical junctures in their lives where they're going to have the most impact. So that's what
Yeah,
I got.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all just doing the best we can is really what it comes down to. So maybe we'll get a grade at the end. We don't know. I appreciate your time, Drew, and I hope this was useful for people who are kind of thinking about how, and why. I don't think the way that Drew and I, kind of grew up are the only ways that you can teach financial security. But there's certainly what we have the experience is. I hope to have a number of other people with kind of other opinions on, just to talk about teaching financial responsibility. Otherwise, I hope you found this useful, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.